Okay, so today we will see regarding leukocyst sarcoma, a group of pathogens. Okay, so this particularly here you can see this is what we use group, right? So this is actually group of outward manifestations which is caused by retroviruses, right? So this leukocyst sarcoma group is a various group of various conditions which is caused by retroviruses, and there are actually so many conditions which is caused by this retrovirus, but among few here we have listed some of these conditions. The first one, the most common outward manifestation of this group is lymphoid leukosis, erythroblastosis, myeloid leukosis, myelocytoma. Then they are also responsible for induction of many benign and malignant neoplasms of fibrous tissue like fibrosarcoma, cartilage tumors, bone tumors, epithelial tumors, and many other tumors. As well as they are also responsible for production of osteopetrosis, meningioma, and glioma. Right. So this leukocyst sarcoma, name itself indicates sarcoma means malignant neoplasm of mesenchymal tissue, and leukocyst means leukemia. Leukocyst means leukemia, and leukemia means generally tumors of bone forming tissue. Tumors of bone forming tissue is known as leukemia, and the synonym is leukocyst, right? So leukocyst sarcoma group, this is a group of disease, and this includes so many conditions, right? So this leukocyst sarcoma group is caused by the etiology for this particularly conditions are belongs to retroviridae, right? So they are belongs to retroviridae. This particularly avian leukocyst sarcoma group of virus belongs to genus alpha retrovirus, subfamily orthoretroviridae, and family retroviridae. So this retroviridae family have total 6 genus, and among these 6 genus, this avian leukocyst sarcoma group is belongs to genus alpha retrovirus. Okay, then among another important genus of this retrovirus is lentivirus genus, and this lentivirus genus includes important pathogens of human immunodeficiency virus, right? Apart from that, many other important virus are also present in this particular family. This includes pulmonary adenomatosis virus, bovine leukemia virus, Medivista virus, caprine encephalitis virus, as well as bovine immunodeficiency virus, right? So this particular family contain very important viruses. Many of them are oncogenic. They are responsible for tumor productions, and particularly for this our interest, particularly for in our avian interest, this avian leukocyst virus belongs to genus alpha retrovirus, subfamily orthoretroviridae, and family retroviridae. So this particularly virus, avian leukocyst virus, are spherical virus. They are enveloped virus. They consist of two linear, here you can see these are the two linear positive sense single stranded RNA, right? As well as apart from this particularly viral genome, they also contain some important proteins which are responsible for either attachment or they have some other functions in the virus. This includes, here you can see there are some dome shaped structures, right? Some particular structures are above the viral surface, but some of them are actually embedded in the virus. So this, the yellow portion which is embedded in the virus, they are known as transmembrane protein. These particular proteins are known as surface glycoprotein, right? So this is surface glycoprotein, this is transmembrane glycoprotein. These are the, we have already discussed, these are the viral genome. Then this particularly blue one is are integrase enzymes. They are very important enzymes that will be discussed just within few minutes. This is another important enzyme known as reverse transcriptase, right? Generally, what is the role of transcriptase enzymes? They are actually such type of enzymes will act on a DNA and it will produce RNA, right? But here what happens? This is reverse one, and this particular enzymes will act on RNA. It will produce complementary DNA, right? So slightly reverse one. Then you will find one capsid, matrix protein, and many other proteins are present inside the viruses. Okay. So now we will discuss about viral genome. So here you can see this is a viral genome, and generally in this particularly avian leukocyst virus, particularly this alpha retroviruses have total 3 genes in their genome, as well as you will find one LTR, long terminal repeats, right? You will find long terminal repeats as well as 3 important genes: GAG-PRO first one, POL second one, and ENV third gene, right? So you will find total 3 important genes in this particular retroviruses, and here you can see what are the products of these genes. ENV genes are responsible for production of a surface glycoprotein as well as transmembrane glycoprotein. What are these? Here you can see we have already discussed. This is transmembrane glycoprotein and these are the surface glycoprotein. So these particular proteins are product of particularly this gene, ENV gene. Then this POL gene are responsible for production of 2 important enzymes, reverse transcriptase enzymes and integrase enzymes. The role will be discussed in shortly. And another gene is GAG-PRO, right? So this GAG-PRO, these particular genes are responsible for production of a structural proteins, importantly capsid, matrix and nucleocapsid, as well as protease enzyme. Okay, so these particularly 4 important proteins are product of this GAG-PRO gene. This reverse transcriptase and integrase is a product of POL gene, and surface glycoprotein and transmembrane glycoproteins is a product. These are the products of ENV gene. Okay, then these are the 2 LTR, long terminal repeats, and they will act as a promoters, right? It will help in the expression of this particular genes inside the host. So it will actually generally provoke their expressions. On simple words, there will be transcription and translation from these particular genes, and these particular products are produced more easily due to this LTR, because they enhance the expression of this particular gene. Okay, now the replication, right? So virus, here we used viral replication, but rather here there is no actual replications occur. There are some slightly different mechanism is utilized by this particular virus. Here you can see this is one host cell, and in this particular picture we used example of HIV virus. This particular picture is taken from web, and I apologize for I just forgot to mention the source. Okay, so here we have taken this HIV virus. We have discussed this HIV virus belongs to genus lentivirus, but the replication is more or less similar with this avian leukocyst virus group. So here we will discuss about this avian leukocyst virus viruses replications, and we will use the picture of this HIV. Okay, so here you can see this is virus, this is host cell. So after entry of the virus into the body, this particularly virus will bind with the host cell membrane with the help of some receptor, and these receptors can be different for different type of viruses. So that will be not important for our UG classes, so we will not discuss in much detail. But with the help of some viruses, this particular with the help of some receptor, this virus will attach with the host cell membrane. Okay, so after attachment of this virus with the host cell membrane, you can see this is attachment, right? So after attachment of this virus with the host cell membrane, there will be formation of endosomes. Endosomes means this particular cell membranes will cover entire virus, and this virus will covered in one vesicle known as endosomes, and these endosomes are covered with the cell membrane protein. Okay, so here there is a formation of endosomes, and inside the endosomes there will be release of some particular enzymes which ultimately decrease the pH of these endosomes, and due to acidic pH decrease means acidic pH, the various virus proteins are get dissolved, and ultimately the strands of RNA are get free, or you can say ultimately there will be viral genomes are become free, and these particular viral genomes will enter inside the host cell. Right, so now this viral genome, reverse transcriptase enzymes as well as protease enzymes are enters inside the host cells. Now there will be a role of reverse transcriptase enzymes, right? We have already discussed what is the role of reverse transcriptase. So here what reverse transcriptase will do? Here reverse transcriptase will act on a single strand RNA and it will form the complementary DNA. It will form complementary DNA of this RNA, right? So here what happened after end of this entire transcriptase method or function, you will find one strand of viral RNA and one strand of complementary DNA, right? So there will be, this is, we can say this is hybrid, this is RNA DNA hybrid, because one strand is RNA, one strand is DNA, right? So you will find RNA DNA hybrid. Okay, now the next step is this reverse transcriptase enzymes have also one another function, and with the help of another functions it will break viral RNA, it will destroy viral RNA. So ultimately what you will find only complementary DNA, you will find only complementary DNA, and now again from this complementary DNA another strand of this DNA will be formed, and you will find typical normal double helical structures of the DNA, and this is nothing but this is actually viral DNA, because this entire, these are the just complementary to this viral RNA. So you can say this is this genomic information is coming from the virus. So we can say okay, this is pro-virus, because this all information which is present in this virus DNA are coming from this RNA, right? So we can say okay, this is pro-viral RNA, this is pro-viral DNA. Now you have already manufactured inside the cytoplasm there is a manufacturing of a pro-viral DNA, and now this pro-viral DNA will be inserted into the host cell DNA, right? So here you can see this blue color are host cell DNA, this yellow one is a pro-viral DNA, and now for insertion of this particular pro-viral DNA into the host cell DNA, one another enzyme known as integrase will help, right? So here what happened, this integrase enzyme will act on a host cell DNA, and it will break their it will make some cut in host cell DNA, and ultimately it will make some gap, and inside this particular gap viral DNA will get inserted. So there will be insertion of viral DNA into the host DNA with the help of integrase enzyme. You can say simple, there is a gluing of pro-viral DNA into the host DNA. Now this particular pro-viral DNA has become part of host DNA. Now this is become almost an irreversible process, right? You cannot remove this particular part of DNA with most methods, or it become very difficult in vivo to remove such type of DNA, right? So it become almost a permanent step, and this viral DNA are actually integrated into the host DNA. Now when this particularly host DNA is transcribed and translated, or in simple word we can say transcribed, means ultimately when this mRNA or RNA are manufactured from this DNA, in that case this particular pro-viral DNA will also transcribed, and you will find formation of some RNA, right? So now this RNA, they are RNA nothing but this is same just like viral RNA, right? So they will form this viral RNA from this DNA, and ultimately from this RNA you will there will be manufacturing of various viral protein like capsid, matrix, nucleocapsid, as well as surface glycoprotein, transmembrane glycoprotein will be manufactured from this particularly RNA, as well as this particular RNA will also act as a genomic material, and this entire materials are now packed in one vesicles, and ultimately these vesicles will be thrown out from the cells, and it will cover with some cell membrane. So ultimately it will covered with the cell membrane, and you will find one entire mature virus is coming out from the host cells, right? So this is not simple what I have explained. It have hundreds of steps, they have multiple processes in this particular process, entire process, but this is the simple explanation of this virus replication. Now this mature virus is coming out from the cells, and it will affect another cells, and again this entire process will be repeated, right? So this is actual virus replication. Okay, then these particular viruses are again divided into two subtypes: exogenous leukocyst virus and endogenous leukocyst virus. Okay, so exogenous leukocyst virus are those viruses which are transmitted from one birds to another birds in form of virus particle, like just other particles what we have discussed earlier, like uh, IBD virus or even influenza virus or other coronaviruses, right? So this particular virus particle will be transmitted just like other viruses as a virus particle. This transmission can be horizontal, can be vertical, that's not a problem, but in this case we will use the word exogenous leukocyst virus. In that case we will use the word exogenous leukocyst virus when virus are transmitted as a horizontal or vertical route as a infectious particles, virus particles, then we will use as a exogenous leukocyst virus. Okay, then endogenous leukocyst virus, what happened here? These particular viruses are not transmitted as a virus particle, but rather than the entire viral genome are inserted in the germ lines of the host, and they will transmit it through the progenies to the offsprings, right? They will transmit it to the offsprings with the germ lines, right? When such type of transmission occurs, this is known as endogenous leukocyst virus. What it means? It means proviral DNA are present in the young ones or newborns, and ultimately by this route there will be transmission of the virus. So ultimately it will transmit it in their entire pedigree. It will transmit it through their offsprings, right? So here what happened, the most essential part is here the virus proviral DNA are inserted into host DNA, and according to one research in humans, almost 8% of human genomes are actually nothing but they are genomes of the retroviruses, right? Almost 8% of human genomes are retroviral genome. So you can imagine from previous past, so many type of viruses have attacked our human cells and ultimately particularly germ cells, and they are carried forward from the past. Another good thing for this endogenous virus is that majority of these endogenous viruses are losing their oncogenic capacity, right? Generally, this exogenous leukocyst virus are oncogenic because they have some capacity to induce neoplasms, but in endogenous leukocyst virus, they lose their capacity to produce tumors, and because of some of those mutations, and ultimately they become non-oncogenic, right? So this is another important thing that we should remember for endogenous leukocyst viruses. Okay. So this is about exogenous when they are transmitted as a virus particles, endogenous when they are inserted inside the host genome, particularly in the germ cell lines, and when there is such type of transmission, you can say this is endogenous leukocyst viruses. Okay, there are two another important terms regarding these retroviruses. The first term is slowly transforming retroviruses. Okay, so what it means? We have already discussed this majority of these retroviruses, particularly avian leukocyst virus, are oncogenic. They are responsible for production of tumors in birds. Okay, so they are oncogenic. In slow transforming retroviruses, they will produce tumors, but it will take longer time. It will take some time for production of a tumor. So when it take a very long time, in that case we can use the word, these are the slow transforming retroviruses. They are slow transforming retroviruses, right? So here what happened, that we will see here in this particularly graphical presentation. So here you can see this is this entire area is actually viral genome. Here you can see there are total 3 viral genomes are present: GAG-PRO, POL, and EN, right? So these particular genes are present inside the virus, and there will be 2 LTRNs which is not depicted here. Okay, and this one is actually host genome. In this case, poultry cells, right? So in this particular, these are the host genome, and host genomes are actually contain hundreds of genes, thousands of genes inside the genome. So as we have discussed, a host genome contain thousands of genes in the genome, right? And among this genome, some of the genomes or genes are actually proto-oncogenes. So what you mean by proto-oncogenes? These proto-oncogenes are nothing but the genes which are responsible for normal replication of the host cells. So when these particularly proto-oncogenes are transcribed and translated, ultimately the protein product will act on a cells, and this will induce mitosis or meiosis in the cells, right? So these are the actually proto-oncogenes. Okay, so here what happened, particularly in slow transferring retrovirus, we have already discussed that these retroviruses will insert the genome into the host. And for slow transforming retroviruses, the genome should be inserted just upstream to such type of proto-oncogenes inside the host, right? So here you can see there are hundreds or millions of genes present inside the host DNA, right? And insertion of the proviral DNA just upstream to the proto-oncogenes is a chance, or you can say this is luck, right? So by chance, when this viral genomes or viral proviral DNA, when they are inserted just upstream, or you can say just near to the proto-oncogenes, in that case, when this entire proviral DNA get transcribed, in that case this proto-oncogenes will also transcribe, and ultimately you will find products which are responsible for induction of a mitosis inside the cells, right? So here what happened, this particularly virus have to insert the genome just nearer to the proto-oncogene. This is purely basis on the luck. It may occur after it will occur after 1,000 time repetitions, or sometime millions time repetitions, right? So this is purely based on the luck. So when this virus have a good luck, in that case this viral genome will be inserted just nearer to the oncogenes, proto-oncogenes of the host, and ultimately there will be induction of a tumor inside the host. Okay, then another term is rapidly or acutely transforming retroviruses. So here what happen, this retroviruses will induce tumors in very shorter period of time. So when they induce in very short time, we can use the word these viruses are rapidly transforming or acutely transforming retroviruses. So here in this particular picture you can see this is normal viral genome. They contain three of the genes, GAG, POL and ENV, and this is the host genome, where they contain hundreds or millions of genes, and among these particular millions of genes there are some proto-oncogenes which are responsible for induction of normal mitosis, right? So here this particular virus will insert the genome inside the host, and from this proviral DNA, when this new virus are formed, in that case this virus will take one of these proto-oncogenes into their genomes, right? It will take normal host proto-oncogenes into their viral genome, and they are, now we can say, okay, this is viral oncogenes. They are nothing but they are actually host proto-oncogenes which is taken up by the virus, right? So virus will take one proto-oncogenes from the host, but now they have only two another genes, right? GAG-PRO and POL, and this particular virus will miss one particular gene. It may be either ENV, it may be POL, or it may be GAG or PRO, right? So now this newly formed virus have two of their viral genome, and one gene is from the host, and they will act as a proto-oncogenes of the host, and they will act as a viral oncogenes. Okay, but as we have see here, there are not all three genes of the virus are present. So ultimately such type of viruses are replicative defective. They cannot replicate properly, right? So in that case they require some help from other viruses. So here you can see this is another virus. They have envelope gene, ENV gene in their genome, but they missed POL gene, right? So here this both viruses are actually defective. They cannot replicate properly. But here what happens, when they infect stem cells simultaneously, in that case this particular virus will utilize this ENV gene, and this particular virus can utilize this virus gene, right? So ultimately this virus will help each other for the normal virus replication. In that case this viral genome will be transcribed and translated. In that case this particular viral oncogene will also translated and it will produce proteins which will act on a host cells and it will produce tumor protein, right? So here virus itself have a viral oncogenes and ultimately due to this reason it will produce tumor in a very shorter period of time. One another thing that we should remember that only Rous sarcoma virus contain all four genomes: GAGPRO, POL, ENV and SRC gene. SRC gene are stand for the sarcoma gene. So generally they are responsible for tumors in chicken. So only Rous sarcoma virus is only complete virus. They are not replicative defective. They are able to replicate without host oncogenes or any helper virus, right? So only Rous sarcoma virus is a complete virus, while remaining all other viruses, particularly acutely transforming retroviruses, are a defective virus. They require some helper virus for their complete replication, right? So Rous sarcoma virus, complete virus, they contain 3 + 1 gene, so total 4 gene. Okay, then this particularly avian leukocyst viruses are again subgrouped into A, B, C, D, E and J, right? So this particularly avian leukocyst virus group have total 6 subgroups: A, B, C, D, E and J, and these particular subgroups are classified on the basis of their analog glycoproteins, interference pattern and host range in chicken cells of varying phenotypes. So what is interference pattern? Means interference pattern, they are nothing but what we have to do in this interference pattern. Susceptible avian embryo fibroblast cultures are infected with avian leukocyst virus of each subgroup and challenged several days later with the Rous sarcoma virus of each subgroup. Reduction in Rous sarcoma virus foci in infected cultures compared with the unaffected control is indicative of viral interference. And on the basis of that, these subgroups are actually created: A, B, C, D and J. So among these 6 subgroups, generally subgroup E is considered as endogenous viruses, while remaining all are considered as exogenous viruses, right? So endogenous means their genomes are inserted inside the host genome and ultimately they are transmitted in that manner, while A, B, C, D and J, they are exogenous viruses and they are transmitted as a virus particle. Okay, so with this introduction, now we will start with our first disease, lymphoid leukosis. Okay, so now we'll see regarding lymphoid leukosis. So we have already discussed why we use the word leukosis, means related to leukemia, but the term leukosis is used because leukemic blood picture is not always present during the course of leukemia or leukemia like proliferative disease of the hemopoietic system, right? So due to these particular reasons, because every time these particular neoplastic cells are not always present in blood, so in due to this regard we used the word leukosis rather than leukemia. So this lymphoid leukosis is a under natural condition, this is most common. Lymphoid leukosis is the most common form of leukocyst sarcoma group of disease seen in chicken, and it is characterized by enlargement of a liver as well as bursa by infiltrating lymphoblast. This lymphoid leukosis is also known as big liver disease. This is very important synonyms of this disease, as well as this lymphoid leukosis is also known as lymphatic leukosis, visceral lymphoma, lymphocytoma, visceral lymphomatosis and lymphoid leukosis. Now etiology. So etiology of this particularly lymphoid leukosis is avian leukocyst virus. We have already discussed this is positive science single stranded RNA virus, and among various subgroups, what we have already discussed, among various subgroups, subgroup A and B are most prevalent and they are most frequently associated with lymphoid leukosis. So this particular avian leukosis virus belongs to genus Alpha retrovirus, subfamily Orthoretroviridae, family Retroviridae. And how they replicate inside the cells we have already discussed in this just before this LL topic. Now host. Chickens are the natural host for all viruses of this leukosis sarcoma group. These viruses have not been isolated from other avian species except pheasants and quail. Generally, females are more susceptible as compared to male for this lymphoid leukosis virus, and this lymphoid leukosis appears between the 14th week of age to 13th week of age. In field, outbreak can mostly occurs after 14 weeks of age. However, incidence is usually highest at about sexual maturity. Transmission. We have all discussed that two types of viruses, exogenous virus and endogenous viruses. So exogenous viruses can be transmitted by two ways, vertically and horizontally. Vertically from hen to progeny through the eggs, and horizontally from bird to bird by direct or indirect contact, or direct contact with the chicken to chicken. Endogenous viruses are transmitted genetically from germlines in both the sexes, and this is actually applicable to most of these all retroviruses. Now pathogenesis. So pathogenesis of lymphoid leukosis, particularly bursa, play a very important role in development of lymphoma. So here what happen after entry of the virus into the body, initially virus will replicate in many tissue, and then after initial replication it will reach into the bursa, and inside the bursa it will infect macrophages. So macrophages play a very important role in development of lymphoma. So this particularly infected macrophage will transfer this particular virus to lymphoid cells, particularly B lymphocytes of the bursa. So this particular virus will replicate inside the B lymphocytes, particularly developing B lymphocytes, and we have already discussed that this particular virus will insert the pro-viral DNA or their viral genome into the host cell. So here this particularly virus will replicate in B lymphocyte, and it will produce first the pro-viral DNA, and this pro-viral DNA will inserted into the host genome. And here what happen, in most of the time these particular genomes are inserted just nearer to the c-MYC gene, CMYC gene, c-MYC gene, right? So there are various form of this MYC gene, MYC gene, and these particular MYC genes are responsible for normal proliferation of the cells. They are generally responsible for induction of mitosis, replications. They will induce replication inside the cell. So here what happen, the pro-viral DNA are inserted just upstream to the c-MYC gene, and due to this insertion of this upstream to the c-MYC gene, ultimately what happen, when these viral genomes are transcribed, ultimately the c-MYC gene will also transcribe, and it will produce such a proteins which are responsible, or it will induce the replication of a lymphoblast or immature B lymphocytes, immature B lymphoblast. So ultimately here what happen, there will be severe replications of or you can say overexpression of MYC protein, which induce the severe replication of the lymphoblast, as well as it will also prevent the differentiation of a B lymphoblast. Generally what happen here, so many follicles of this bursa get affected, and so many follicles in the bursa will initially show some replication, but all these follicles will not converted into the lymphoma. Some of these follicles are actually get regressed, and very few follicles or one or two follicles will converted into lymphoma. Generally this neoplastic tumors, or this particularly neoplastic bursa, are generally visible from 14 week of age, and this particular neoplastic cells generally get metastasized from bursa to another organs like liver, spleen, and when they actually infest this particularly liver and spleen like organs, ultimately this will leads to death of the birds. Now clinical signs. So clinical sign of this disease is not much specific. You cannot say okay, this is a case of lymphoid leukosis just simply on basis of clinical sign, because they are not much specific. They are not indicative of the disease. Generally in affected birds you will find inappetence, weakness, diarrhea, dehydration, emaciation, right? So these particular changes are actually not indicative of this disease. In when particular livers and spleen get enlarged due to lymphoma, in that case you will find abdominal enlargement, and sometimes their comb become pale, or occasionally it become cyanotic, right? But generally these all clinical signs are non-specific. On basis of clinical sign you cannot say this is a case of lymphoid leukosis. Now gross pathology. So grossly what you will find, generally tumors invariably involve liver, spleen, bursa. So these are the three, these particular three organs are most commonly affected in case of lymphoid leukosis. Liver, spleen and bursa will show particularly white spots and or nodules, and this is nothing but they are actually infiltrating lymphoblast, neoplastic lymphoblast. And often other organs like kidney, lung, gonad, heart, bone marrow and mesentery are also involved. They will also show variable sized foci or nodules, which are generally white in color because they are made up of infiltrating neoplastic lymphoblast. Generally this tumor growth may be nodular, or nodular means for large nodules, or it may be miliary, means you will find very small foci. It may be diffused, entire organs are involved, or you will find combination of this particular form. You may find some miliary nodules as well as miliary foci as well as some nodules. So there will be some combinations. Generally these neoplastic nodules are soft, smooth and glistening. Right, here you can see this particular picture. This is the author of this picture, and you can see this particular liver is severely enlarged, and they are showing such type of white foci, and they are nothing but they are actually infiltrating neoplastic lymphoblast. Here also you can see there is almost diffuse enlargement of the liver due to infiltrating lymphoblast inside the liver. All these white foci are actually neoplastic cells. Here you can see this is bursa, and bursa is get enlarged, right? So entire bursa is become enlarged, and this is due to this entire follicle is converted into lymphoma. Here you can see this is another great picture. Here the liver, you will find multifocal to coalescing white nodules that effaced normal architecture of the liver. Okay? So this white foci or these nodules are nothing but they are neoplastic lymphocytes that are infiltrated in the hepatic parenchyma. So microscopically, these tumors are consist of large lymphoblasts or lymphoid cells, and they are generally of same early developmental stage. Then the cytoplasm of most tumor cells are consist of large amount of RNA, and which stain reds with methyl green pyrogen stain. And when you stain such type when you use such type of dye, and when you find ample amount of red staining, what it indicate that cells are immature and they are actually divide rapidly. So here you can see this is bursa of birds, right? So here you can see this is one follicle, second follicle. These are some follicles of the bursa, but here you can see these one follicles are getting severely enlarged and they become neoplastic. So this is generally in case of lymphoid leukosis you will find nodular bursal enlargement. And these are the macroscopic pictures. This is high magnification picture where you find majority of the cells are immature lymphoblasts. You will find some mitotic figures, right? So generally, but simply on basis of H&E we cannot differentiate, okay, this is either Marek's disease or lymphoid leukosis, because we have already discussed Marek's disease is a T cell lymphoma while this is a B cell lymphoma. But simply on H&E staining with the help of light microscope we cannot differentiate this is lymphoid leukosis or This is Marek disease. Although in literature this is mentioned that Marek disease are made up of where they are actually they have pleomorphic cells because they contain lymphoblasts, lymphocytes, macrophages, plasma cells. But in case of lymphoid leukosis, you will find predominantly immature lymphoblast, generally B cell origin, right? And generally here what happened due to this c-Myc overexpressions, generally generally these B cells are get arrested, and you will find IgM on their surface, particularly such type of cells. All these immature cells contain IgM, particularly immunoglobulin M on their surface. So diagnosis based on clinical sign, again they are non-specific. We cannot say simply on basis of clinical sign, okay, this is a case of lymphoid leukosis. On basis of gross and macroscopic lesions, they are suggestive, but we cannot confirm this is a case of lymphoid leukosis. Particularly if you go for weight fixed impression smear, and if we stain with the Meg-Grunwald Giemsa stain or methyl pyronine, in that case we can say, okay, this is a case of lymphoid leukosis. For confirmation of this disease, we have to collect blood, plasma, serum, bursa or vaginal swab or tumors, and from this particularly samples we can confirm this is a case of avian leukosis virus. Again, we can use the complement fixation for avian leukosis. They are also known as COFAL, or we can use ELISA. So these are the some tests on basis of that we can say, okay, this is a case of lymphoid leukosis. Okay, then this is again another important things for examination point of view. This is a difference between Marek's disease and lymphoid leukosis. Many times this is asked in examination, either as a short note or you have to differentiate these two, right? So first, age. Generally Marek's disease are seen from few days to many weeks, while lymphoid leukosis are generally not seen less than 16 weeks of age. Okay, then in Marek's disease, generally nerves are involved. Generally, nerves which are responsible for normal leg movement or wing movement or neck movements, they are affected. So you will find whenever there is a paralysis, you will find some paralytic clinical signs. But generally, in lymphoid leukosis, there will be no any paralytic signs, so there will be no paralysis. In case of Marek's disease, generally incidence are more than 5% particularly when birds are not vaccinated, and in case of lymphoid leukosis the overall incidence are rarely exceed 5%. Again, then origin, Marek's disease are T cell origin, means lymphoma or T cell lymphoma, while lymphoid leukosis is a B cell lymphoma, so they are arise from B lymphocyte. Then gross lesions, generally in case of Marek's disease there will be frequent nerve involvement, so you will find enlargement of nerves, the normal glistening appearance of the nerve will be lost, the cross striation will be also lost, and you will find either focal or diffuse enlargement of a nerve. Such type of changes are generally not present in lymphoid leukosis. In case of bursa, generally bursa are involved in both the cases, but in case of lymphoid leukosis you will find nodular enlargement. Only we will find one large nodule, while in case of Marek's disease, when this bursa is involved, you will find diffuse enlargement. Generally, proventricular skin muscles are generally involved in Marek's disease, while they are generally not involved in lymphoid leukosis. Microscopically, also in Marek's disease, you will find type A, type B, or type C type of lesions in nerve. Generally, in lymphoid leukosis, nerves are not affected. In Marek's disease, liver will show mostly perivascular aggregations of neoplastic lymphocytes, while in lymphoid leukosis, generally you will find either focal or diffused aggregations of neoplastic lymphocytes. In spleen also, in case of Marek's disease, you will find diffuse enlargement, while in case of lymphoid leukosis, you will find focal enlargement. In bursa, generally in case of lymphoid leukosis, generally entire follicles get enlarged, so this is actually tumors arise from follicles, while in case of Marek's disease, generally interfollicular, generally the space between two follicles are get involved, and there will be enlargement of interfollicular space. and there will be infiltration of a neoplastic tissue between two follicles, and generally lymphoid follicles are get atrophied. Macroscopically, again, skin and feather follicles are actually not involved, or they are actually not showing any type of abnormalities in case of lymphoid leukosis, while in case of Murex disease, generally feather follicles, the tip of feather follicles are generally severely infiltrated with the neoplastic T lymphocytes. In central nervous systems, generally, as we have discussed, these particular neoplastic cells or virus may reach into the CNS tissue, and it will be responsible for production of transient paralysis due to vasculitis. It will produce some edema or vasogenic edema are produced in Murex disease, while in case of lymphoid leukosis, generally CNS tissue are not involved. There's cytology. In case of cytology, what we have discussed earlier in Murex disease, you will find pleomorphic cells. Generally, cytological smears are consist of lymphoblast, large lymphocytes, then small and medium sized lymphocytes, as well as some reticular cells. Occasionally you will find some macrophages or plasma cells, but in case of lymphoid leukosis, generally they are mostly made up of lymphoblast. They are in uniform morphology, and they just look like single cell origin or clonal origin. So this is all about difference between the Murex disease and lymphoid leukosis. And now next we will see regarding erythroid leukosis. Okay, so next disease is erythroid leukosis. So erythroid leukosis is a sporadic disease of adult chicken characterized by variable anemia due to presence of erythroblast in blood vessels. This erythroid leukosis is also known as leukemia, intravascular lymphoid leukosis, erythroleukosis, erythromyelosis, erythroblastosis, and erythroid leukosis. Right? So many names for this particular disease. Etiology will again remain same. Avian leukosis virus, positive sense, single stranded RNA viruses, and generally for this erythroid leukosis, generally subgroup J are more common as compared to other subgroups. And again, this particularly belongs to genus Alpha retrovirus, family, subfamily Orthoretrovirinae, and family Retroviridae. Host. Generally, chickens are considered as a natural host for all viruses of this leukosis sarcoma group. Natural cases are usually occurs in birds between 3 to 6 months of age. Transmission is just like other leukosis virus. Generally here also you will find exogenous as well as endogenous transmission. In exogenous transmission, generally it can be vertical, it can be horizontal, like what we have discussed earlier. In endogenous, generally these genomes are inserted into the host, into the germlines, and they will particularly in both the sexes, and they are responsible for transmission of this disease. Now pathogenesis. So after entry of the virus into the body, this virus are slow transforming avian leukosis virus. So this particular virus will reach into the bone marrow after initial replication in different tissue. Inside the bone marrow, this particular virus will infect erythroblast, the cells which are responsible for production of RBC, right? So this particular virus will infect erythroblast, and by chance, by luck, the proviral DNA will be inserted just upstream to CERBB gene. C means cellular, means the host cell. ERBB genes are actually short form from the erythroblastic leukemia viral oncogene, and this is also known as HER, HER. And this is very important proto-oncogenes which are responsible for transmission of they are responsible for the mitosis of the cells. They are induced replication of the cells. And in humans, this particularly HER genes or CERBB genes are mutated in so many tumors. Their overexpressions are associated with so many humans as well as in animal tumors. So here this particularly proviral DNA are inserted just near to this CERBP genes. This is act as a proto-oncogenes, and uh, due to the insertions nearer to the this particular genes, ultimately when this particularly virus are transcripted, ultimately there will be also formation of the proteins from this particular genes, and this will leads to inductions of replication of this particular erythroblast viruses. So due to overexpression of this particular genes, it will induce excessive replications and proliferation of the erythroblast. So slowly and slowly this entire bone marrow will be filled with this erythroblast. Ultimately it will enter into the blood circulations, it will reach into the various other organs like liver and other organs, and ultimately it will fill the sinusoid of the livers, as well as this particularly cells are also get accumulated into the spleen. So you will find enlargement of different organs like spleen and liver due to accumulations of such type of immature RBC erythroblast. So generally number of erythroblasts are increased, but their hemoglobin concentration will be not properly achieved. So generally, even though number are quite high, but hemoglobin concentration is quite low, and ultimately birds will suffer from anemia due to severe enlargement of the organs, due to accumulation of this erythroblast, as well as due to anemia. Slowly and slowly these birds will go towards death. So this will leads to death of the birds. Clinical signs, again in this case also clinical signs are not much specific. External signs of disease are not indicative of this disease. Generally you will find inappetence, weakness, diarrhea, dehydration or emaciation. Generally you may find hemorrhage from the feather follicles, but again this is not much specific. Now gross pathology. So grossly, what we have discussed, generally due to excessive proliferation or replication of erythroblast in bone marrow, so entire bone marrow are filled with this type of cells. So when you open the bone marrow, you will find typical hyperplastic, semi-liquid, red color bone marrow, and this particularly immature cells slowly and slowly from this bone marrow they will enter into the circulations and reach into the other organs like spleen, liver and kidney, and they will accumulate it inside the such organs. So you will also find enlargement of liver, spleen and kidney, and the color will also change. It becomes like mahogany color, they become dark cherry red color due to excessive accumulation of such type of immature RBC or erythroblast. You will also find petechial hemorrhages that involve various organs of the body. You may find thrombosis, you may find infarctions, and sometimes due to excessive accumulation of erythroblast inside the liver or spleen, sometimes these organs are get ruptured. So in this picture you can see this is a liver. This entire liver is enlarged. This enlargement is due to excessive accumulation of erythroblast in sinusoids, and many times these accumulated cells will give pressure atrophy to the livers, and many times hepatocytes will also get atrophied. Here you can see this is kidney are get enlarged, and the color also becomes slightly reddish or mahogany type due to excessive accumulation of erythroblast. You can see this is a ovary, slightly atrophied or inactive ovaries. Microscopically, what you will find, first of all, when you examine the bone marrow, you will find bone marrow sinusoids are filled with the rapidly proliferating, means you will find ample amount of mitosis, rapidly proliferating erythroblast, and generally they are fail to mature. There will be no proper different lineage or different cells of RBC lineage. You will not find that particular cell lineage that are responsible for RBC production. Particularly in later stage, when entire bone marrow is filled with erythroblast, they will enter into the circulation. It will reach into the liver, spleen, and other organs. And generally, when you examine microscopically, liver, spleen, sinusoids are generally filled with this type of erythroblastic cells. And as we have discussed many a time, these erythroblastic cells or this erythroblast will, when they are accumulated in excess quantity, it will induce pressure on the surrounding tissue, and ultimately this will lead to pressure atrophy. Another important thing is, although this accumulation of erythroblast may be extensive, but it will always remain inside the blood vessels, unlike lymphoid leukocytes or myeloblastosis, right? They will not come out from the circulation or sinusoid. So here you can see this is a microscopic picture of liver, and this is the hepatic plates, and you can see these are the sinusoids. Inside the sinusoid, very few, here you can see these are the few mature RBC are visible. Otherwise, majority of the sinusoids are filled with the immature RBC producing cells, means erythroblast, right? So these sinusoids are filled with the erythroblast. So diagnosis, again diagnosis on the basis of clinical sign, gross and microscopic pathology, but they are suggestive of the disease. For confirmation, again you have to go for some serological and molecular testing, and on the basis of that you can diagnose this particular disease. So next tumor is myeloblastosis. Name itself indicate, here you will find predominant cells are myeloblast, or you can say this tumors are consist of myeloblast. So this is also known as leukemic myeloid leukosis, leukomyelosis, myelomatosis, myeloblastosis, and many other names, right? So this particular tumor is also caused by avian myeloblast virus, belongs to this avian leukosis sarcoma group, and here the neoplasms are predominantly contain myeloblast, and this particular neoplasms are most commonly seen in adult chicken. And grossly, what you will find, grossly generally liver is greatly enlarged and become firm, as well as you will find some infiltration of this myeloblast. So you will find diffuse grayish nodules in the liver, and many a time due to excessive infiltration of this neoplastic cells, generally you will find a Morocco leather appearance of the liver. Spleen and kidney are also affected. They are also get enlarged due to excessive infiltration of this myeloblast. The bone marrow will also generally affected. They are also generally replaced by solid yellowish gray tumor cell. Right? Generally, normally what happens, due to presence of hemoglobin or RBC producing cells, generally bone marrow are red in color. But here what happens, due to excessive proliferation of this myeloblast, generally entire bone marrow species are replaced with the neoplastic cells, and generally myoblasts are white blood cells. So generally it will give typical grayish look to the bone marrow. Microscopically, what you will find, if you prepare a blood smear from the affected animal, what you will find large cells with a slightly basophilic clear cytoplasm and a large nucleus containing 1 to 4 acidophilic nucleoli which do not stain prominently. Occasionally you will also find promyelocytes and myelocytes, and they can easily be identified by the specific granules. Particularly in microscopically in other organs like liver, you will find massive infiltration of these cells, and this particular infiltration may be seen inside the sinusoid as well as in the parenchyma. So both the species are get involved. They are actually filled with the myeloblasts. You will find excessive aggregations of these myeloblasts in these organs, and due to excessive replacement of the bone marrow tissue with the neoplastic tissue, you will find anemia. And in this particularly myeloblastosis, here this particularly proviral DNA inserted just upstream to the VMYB gene or VMYB gene, right? So this is also proto-oncogenes which are responsible, or they induced replications or proliferations of the myeloblast. Here you can see this is a picture of myeloblastosis. This liver has become severely enlarged. The next one is myelocytomatosis. Myelocytomatosis. So myelocytomatosis, also known as myelocytic myeloid leukosis, myelocytoma, or leukemic myeloid leukosis, or some other names are also there. and this particular tumor is caused by avian myeloblastosis virus subgroup J. Here this particular subgroup J is responsible for tumor production, and here the neoplastic cells are myelocytes. Predominant neoplastic cells are myelocytes. In earlier tumors it was myeloblast. Here you will find myelocytes. And characteristically, what you will find in this particularly myelocytomatosis, you will find nodules formed on the surface of bone in association with the periosteum and near cartilage. Although some other tissue, internal organs may also get involved. Particularly flat bones of skulls are most commonly affected. Myeloblastoma often develop at the costochondral junction of the rib, on inner sternum, in pelvis, and on the cartilaginous bone of the mandible or nares. Tumor may also be seen in oral cavity, trachea, and in around the eye. Tumors are usually nodular and multiple with soft friable consistency and cream color. In the disease, this particularly subgroup J is responsible for this particular disease what we have discussed, and they are also responsible for enlargement of liver, spleen, and other organs in addition to skeletal tumors. These tumors consist of mass which are generally uniform, usually well differentiated myelocytes. Their nuclei are large, vesicular, and usually eccentrically located, and distinct nucleolus is also present. The cytoplasm is usually tightly packed with acidophilic granules, which are usually spherical, and such type of typical characteristics are seen generally when you take smears and when you stain with May Grunwald Giemsa stain. Here you can see this is a lung, and lung showing typical myelocytomatosis, means infiltration of myelocytes in lung. Here you can see this is heart, and heart are showing multifocal to coalescing nodules, neoplastic nodules. They are, you can see they are actually soft, friable, or cream in color. Okay, then some other tumors which is caused by this avian leukocyst sarcoma group of viruses. So many of the solid tumors like fibrosarcoma, malignant tumors of fibrous tissue, chondroma, benign tumors of cartilage, histiocytic sarcoma, malignant tumors of histiocytes, some tumors which arise from the blood vessels and endothelial cells like endothelioma and hemangioma, then nephroblastoma, hepatocellular carcinoma, means liver malignant tumors, right? So many of these tumors can be caused by this virus. And many a time this hemangioma appear as a blood-filled cystic mass. Many times they are also known as blood blisters. Blood blisters are nothing but this is blood-filled cystic cavity, and generally they are represents hemangioma. Hemangioma is this is benign neoplasms of blood vessels. Next condition is osteopetrosis. So osteopetrosis is just the opposite term of osteoporosis. In osteoporosis generally there will be decreased bone density, but here in osteopetrosis there will be severe increase in bone density. Here bone have become thick due to excessive proliferation of osteoblast. So this is an uncommon bone disorder affecting the mainly long bones, particularly tibia or tarsometatarsal bone, or occasionally veins. And here what happens, there will be excessive osteoblast proliferations, and due to excessive osteoblast proliferations there will be a gross thickening of diaphysis, means middle portion of the long bones. And when this due to excessive proliferation of this osteoblast, more and more amount of bones are formed. So ultimately, this will occlude the bone marrow lumen, and generally entire bone marrow lumens are filled with the bony tissue. So there will be no space remain for bone marrow tissue, and there will be no proper production of RBC, WBC, and other tissue. So many times this will lead to development of anemia. And generally in case of mammals, generally what happens, there will be some problem in osteoclasts which are responsible for resorption or lytic action on the bones. So but in case of birds, generally osteoclast activity are not much affected, but here due to excessive proliferation of osteoclast, generally you will find more amount of bony tissue or higher bony density. But in case of mammals, generally osteoclast activity are responsible for osteopetrosis, because there will be no proper bone lysis or bone resorption with the help of osteoclast. So here you can see these are the pictures. These pictures and many other pictures are taken from Noha Archives of C.L. Davis Foundation page. So here you can see these are the bones are severely thickened. Grossly you can see the difference. They are severely thickened. So when bone density is increased, this is known as osteopetrosis, thickening of bone. And here you can see this is cross section. Again, this picture is also taken from Noha Archives. This is, you can see this is normal femur for comparison, and you can see the affected one. Look at the diameter and size, and you can just compare with the normal one. You can see what is osteopetrosis, right? So severe thickening of bone due to excessive proliferation of osteoblasts. And the last disease in this lecture is reticuloendotheliosis. So reticuloendotheliosis designates a group of syndrome associated with the chronic and acute neoplasia, immunosuppressions, runting disease, and acute death in several avian species caused by retroviruses of the reticuloendothelial virus group. The clinical disease is infrequent, but infections appear to be widespread. This is a primarily disease seen in chickens and turkey, but also some other species like squirrel, duck, pheasants, geese, and peafowls are also affected. This particular virus are transmitted horizontally as well as vertically, and etiology of this disease is reticuloendothelial virus, belongs to genus Gamma retrovirus, family Retroviridae. Earlier disease belongs to alpha genus, while here this is gamma genus. And here particularly this viral REL gene are responsible for development of tumor, like in other particularly ERBB or MYC or MYB genes are responsible for development of tumor. In this case, REL genes are responsible for development of tumors. Generally in Runting syndrome you will find thymic and bursal atrophy, as well as neuritis and lymphoma. It's just similar to Marek's disease. In chronic cases you will find bursal and visceral lymphoma, just similar to the lymphoid leukosis. And in some cases like in acute reticulum cell sarcoma you will find enlarged liver, spleen, kidney, heart, and other organs. So this is all about avian leukosis sarcoma virus group and reticuloendotheliosis viruses. Thank you.